Hi all, it's PJ and welcome to the video supplement for the Serger Pillowcase with piping. So this is what our project is going to end up looking like. This is just a made-up size because a full-size pillowcase wouldn't fit within my camera view. So you've got a band that's clean finished. So here's your seam at the edge. So this is all nicely clean finished. Let me get that so that you can actually see it. There we go. Oh, there's my tail that I didn't trim. So you can see that's all nicely clean finished. And then there's little piping detail. There you go. So there are raw edges. This isn't a French seamed pillowcase, but the raw edges are back down in here. So you have to look fairly far into your pillow to actually see your raw edges. So that's one of the reasons I like to do the pillowcases this way, because this edge, this is the part that you would most likely see is right here, and that's all nicely finished. All right, let's get started with the process. All of your measurements are going to be in the full written instructions. You're going to have your, this is the pillowcase band and this is the actual pillowcase. And then here's the piping that I made in the previous step. So first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that your pieces are the same width. So I'm just going to open this out because you're going to have to sew your band back to your body. And if they aren't the same width, you're going to have a little trouble making those fit. So I'm just going to lay these up. And again, this is going to go this way. So make sure that you're trimming your widths correctly. So I'm just laying this up. And these are actually pretty close, but I'm going to cut the salvage off just to make sure. All right, so those are exactly the same width now. The first thing that you're gonna wanna do is fold your band hot dog wise, and we're gonna sew a seam down here. At the same time, you can sew your pillowcase body together. And here, in essence, you're just gonna sew down here and down here. All right, I'm going to go serge those. I will be right back. I've serged the end and the side of my pillowcase. I started here and I just went down here. I serged off a little bit and turned the corner. I didn't even trim those threads and then just serged off here. I'm just leaving a tail. You could come back down and do a clean stop if you want the inside of your pillowcase to be very nicely finished. I'm just going to leave that tail. So here's my band. I'm gonna just finger press this seam. Half of it I'm gonna send to one side, and about halfway down I'm gonna flip it and have it go in the opposite direction, because you're going to fold this back in on itself so that wrong sides are together. And at the seam, you want one of your seam allowances going in one direction. Let me see if I can get this up here so that you can actually see what I'm doing. So one is going in, there we go. One is going in one direction and the other one is going the other direction. And then you're just gonna straighten this out, and you can go and press this if you'd like. And I am gonna go do that. So I will be right back. We're at the serger. I have my piping and I have my band. So I have my piping foot on and I'm set up at just a standard 4-thread overlock. I'm using the widest width and the longest length. Since this little sample is a fairly small circle, I'm going to do what I call sewing inside of the circle, meaning that I'm going to position it this way so that I always know where my top piece is here. if we were to sew it this way, you'd be constantly trying to move this out of the way. It just, if you do sew inside the circle, it just makes it a little easier. So this is the right side of your fabric. So I'm going to start this. I want my join, I don't want my join to fall exactly at this seam because you're going to end up with a couple layers of your piping. And you don't want the extra bulk right here. So I'm going to start this. This is going to go this way on my pillowcase. So this is going to be the back side. So I want my join to fall just past the seam on the back side. So I am going to wiggle my flywheel and release the stitches off of my stitch finger. Here's my seam. I'm going to start I need to find the right end. You're going to put your piping right sides together with the right side of your band. And I'm going to start a couple of inches down from the end of the piping. And I want my join to be a couple of inches from that seam. So I'm actually going to use the seam as my guide right there. And the edge of your piping is going to be at the edge of your pillowcase band. So I'm just going to sneak all of this underneath here. I'm going to lower my presser foot to kind of anchor that. And I'm going to sew all the way around this until I get back to the start. I'm back to my start. I'm going to just trim this thread tail. Here's my starting end. This is my ending end. I'm going to bring the ending end past where I started, which is right here. You can see the different colored thread. A couple of inches past there, and I'm going to trim this off. From my starting end, I'm going to pull out this cord, and I want to trim off about 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to pull the casing bit back up. So my cord is stopping right here. On my ending end, we'll pull the cord out of here. And I'm going to lay this down here. Here is where, right there, is where my cord starts. So my stopping cord, I want to be just back of that, like 1/16 of an inch. And then I'm going to pull this way. So now I'm just going to angle this end over. I'm going to lay this down. This is all nice and flat, and I'm aligning these edges. And I'm going to stitch down. I'm going to let that bit get caught, and then I'm just going to angle this side off this direction. And again, your cord is just running in a straight line down the groove here. And I'm just making sure that this right edge is, the very end of this is not to the left of my left needle. It needs to be to the right of the right needle. I'm just letting that trim, and then I'm going to lock my knife, and I'm going to go past that about 1 inch. And then I'm just going to release this and then stitch off. So your join is right here, and you can see with the matching, you can barely see where that's joining up. All right, so we're ready to sew this onto our body. So since this is already right sides to the inside, I am going to just turn my body so that it's matching up. And I'm going to line up my seams. Where is my seam? There's my seam. I'm just going to put this inside. And line up that seam. I'm going to sew again inside of the circle this way. Also, you'll have only one layer here, so it will be easier for the cord to follow in the groove because you're only having to go through one thickness. You can push your seam to whichever side it decides it wants to go to because the other ones are already split. So once again, I'm going to release the stitches off my stitch finger so that I can get in there and start nice and cleanly. And I'm just going to feed this in here. You can unlock your knife, and then again, your cord is just riding in the groove, and you're just going to line this up, and you're going to stitch your body on. If your band shrunk ever so slightly when you were adding your piping, if you just give it a gentle tug, that should all sew back in there nice and flat. And then again, go over your starting point a little bit, lock your knife. When I stop, instead of just tailing off, I like to raise my needles, lift my presser foot. You can gently pull on your needle threads and then just pivot this off, put your foot back down and gently stitch off. And then you have a nice clean stop and you can just trim right there. So there is your pillowcase with the band and the piping. And here's my join, which you can barely see. I did a better job of the join than I did of matching the seams. So this is going to be the bottom side of your pillow, this way. Okay, that's it for this month. We'll see you next time. Thanks.